The What's Neat This Week video podcast is supported by enthusiastic model railroaders just like you. Additional support is provided by Athearn Trains. Check out all their new monthly announcements at athearn.com.
Additional support for What's Neat This Week is brought to you by SoundTraxx, industry leaders in model railroad sound and technology for over 30 years. Now please visit our website at SoundTraxx.com, and at checkout, be sure to use the promo code WNTW15 for 15% off of your purchases. And while you're there, be sure to check out our YouTube channel and other information that we have on our website to help you get more familiar with Model Railroader Reader's Choice Award winner 2 times for Favorite Sound Decoder.
Further support is provided by the NCE Corporation, the power of DCC. Visit their website at ncedcc.com. And thank you for supporting the What's Neat This Week podcast. This is the What's Neat This Week, show number 132 for October 10th, 2020. I'm your host, Ken Patterson, the host of the What's Neat show at Model Railroad Hobbyist Magazine. And we just got November done. I can't wait to tell you about it. On this beautiful day today in St. Louis, we've got a special guest in Skype land, and that is David Popp from Kalmbach Publishing in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And in fact, I think they call it Kalmbach Media now, don't they, David?
Yep, we changed the name a couple of years ago. So
that's awesome. Welcome to the show. We've also got Daniel Coombs with us this evening.
Hi, guys.
And Mike Budde.
Hey,
on the
everybody.
Other side of Dave. Hi, Mike. How you doing tonight? You got some cars to talk about. We love it when you do that.
Thanks.
Now, you know, there was a lot of exciting news this week, as usual. And outdoors, we did some run-bys, and I set up the desert again. I need to stop using that, but I used 2 different dioramas this time to shoot the Big Boy from Athearn, number 4014. And I'm going to start out with the desert shot. I don't know the exact count of how long this video clip is, but check it out. There are people standing trackside as this beautiful locomotive is doing its thing, running through the desert with those purple mountains in the background. Really impressive locomotive. I mean, I know the drivers are the right size and the detail is exquisite on this Excursion Engine 4014. I also shot the same locomotive in the grain elevator diorama scene, and that's a 12-foot long diorama that I like to set up and work some buildings behind it. I always like to zoom the camera. And I said last week that I use a Digitrax system outside whenever I'm running the outdoor run-bys. And the real reason for that, and I didn't say it because I thought it would be kind of goofy, but when you're holding a video camera in your hand on a tripod and you're zooming and panning to follow the locomotive, you're also working the zoom button while you're working the movement of the camera. So how are you supposed to hold the throttle in your hand and be able to push the whistle button at the right time and do all the other things? I can hold the Digitrax throttle in my mouth while I do this.
Oh my gosh.
It's true.
Wow.
So
It's saliva proof.
I know right where the buttons are. I got the cord hanging out of my mouth like a puppy dog, and I'm holding the camera, and I'm literally, because I'm a one-man band out there. I don't have a crew of folks to help me do stuff. So anyway, that was the run-bys. I wanted to show them to you. It's always fun to see the outdoor run-bys right away in the show. It's a form of eye candy. Talking about
it's a great-looking engine.
Eye candy. David Popp, you model ON30, which I find fascinating. I mean, you truly are a model railroader, a hobbyist.
Oh yeah, I was a hobbyist far before I ever got into the world of magazine editing, that's for sure. So,
Daniel says you used to have an N-scale layout?
Yeah, for the first 10 years or so that I worked at Kalmbach, I had built an N-scale layout based on the New Haven, set in 1957. Then I backdated it just a little bit because I wanted to run some different power and some different trains on it. But yeah, it modeled the Naugatuck Valley. And I love the layout. It was great. I expanded it 3 times, and it was fully operable. We had all sorts of people come to run the layout at various points. When the NMRA convention was here in Milwaukee several years ago now, we had people from all over the world basically come run the railroad, which was a lot more than I ever would have expected for that little N-scale layout. But it was a lot of fun. It could keep 6 to 8 people busy for a whole evening. Yeah, it was a good little layout.
That's awesome. You know, there's a lot of N-scalers out there. Is it a pretty big market, in your opinion, the N-scale market in general?
Oh, N-Scale's the second largest market out there, next to HO, without a doubt. And what's interesting is a lot of HO modelers have N-Scale models as well, and some of them have either modules or they have, you know, a whole N-Scale layout in addition to their HO layout too. Right. It's a neat alternative. So,
No, that's really cool.
Yeah, N-Scale has come a long way. I mean, it's
oh my gosh, yeah.
Such cool stuff now that they never had when I first started getting into it, like in the early 70s with the Aurora postage stamp trains.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember those?
My dad had Aurora postage stamp trains. One of the early layouts that he and I built together was a small little N-Scale layout that we had just on a coffee table in our living room. And when we were done with it, we'd take the trains off and lean it up against the wall out of the way. But I love that little layout. And those actually, you know, those postage stamp engines were really robust. They ran very, very well. I hate to say it, but other manufacturers in the industry at that time didn't necessarily get it yet. And so there were certain models that, you know, you could kind of time the life on an egg timer pretty much because it wasn't going to last for much. But yeah, those postage stamp trains, those early Rapido trains, they were wonderful. Yeah. They had good mechanisms in them.
Well, I never thought I'd see fine scale in N-Scale, but
also the sound too.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. But
sound in N-Scale is something I never thought I would see. Right. You know, I have to admit I didn't do N-Scale a lot. I was pretty much an HO modeler all through the 80s and 90s, but it wasn't until the 2000s when I started that layout that I got back into it. And it largely was because of the fact that at the office, you know, we'd get product samples in all the time and stuff like that. And the locomotives that were coming in from Atlas at that time, as well as all those little microtrains cars. Oh my gosh, the detail on those things is just wonderful. And I went, well, N-Scale has changed quite a bit since the last time I took a look at it. And so, yeah, I had a blast with it. It was a very fun 10 years building that layout and running it.
So what made you want to change? That was Daniel's question.
So what I was going to ask you earlier.
You just stole Daniel's question.
No, Mike, come on. Okay, so
I was waiting for you to ask it.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
All right, so Dave, and I asked you before we started the show, but why did you decide to go from N-Scale now to what you got behind you on N30? I mean, tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, I will tell you that, you know, N-Scale was great when I was in my late 30s and all through my 40s, but it's sort of like as soon as I hit 50, everything fell apart. So, you know, the eyesight goes in.
Yes.
Oh, about that.
If anybody watches my videos at all, they know that my hands are definitely not the steadiest hands in the world. And as I've aged, they are getting harder and harder to work with really fine things, to the point where it was getting to be very frustrating to try and install grab irons on N-Scale equipment and things like that. You just couldn't hit the hole and the super glue all at the same time.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So I realized that, you know, maybe N-Scale isn't quite for me anymore. Just, you know, it was largely through aging because I really did love that layout. But nope. So I switched it up. I skipped HO entirely this time and went right on to O-Scale. So
it is O-Scale. It's absolutely beautiful. And you sent us 9 photographs of that layout, and the overall photograph that you sent us really exemplifies the fact that you designed it where it's like a shadow box type of a layout.
Let me explain that. There's a good reason for that. First of all, I've always kind of admired what the British do because they have very small amount of space usually. And if they have a home layout at all, a lot of times it's what you see behind me here because it's also portable and you can take it to shows. And actually this breaks into 2 pieces and the legs come off of it very easily. You load it all into a van, you take it to a show, and within a half an hour it's all back together. The trains are on it, you're up and running. It's, you know, it works really well like that. But what I actually was after was thinking, okay, at some point, I'm going to retire eventually. You know, we might not still be living in this large house with this big basement in it. And so what can I do to still get some really good quality model railroading time in, something that's still fun to run, but not take up a heck of a lot of space? And so this it's only 22 inches deep, and then it's got a 13-foot long footprint. So the idea was that you could put it in, you know, I wouldn't say a spare bedroom because usually those are a lot smaller than 13 feet long. But if you can find a space in your house, I designed it actually we go up to, we rent a condo up in Door County every year in order to take vacation time, and we always rent the same condo. And so I use the dining room space in this condo, which adjoins into the living room, as my kind of footprint. It's like, okay, if I retired to this condo, could I still do model railroading here?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes, because, really, the fun part about this layout has been all of the scratch building and the kit bashing and the detailing of the models and everything else. And being that it's O-scale, oh my gosh, it's so much easier to sell.
It's absolutely amazing. Your Olympia sawmill looks beautiful. In fact, you call it the Olympia layout. Is that right?
Yeah, and actually I can't take any credit for that whatsoever. This started out just this half over on this side here. We had built it for MR Video Plus as a project railroad, and it ran over the course of about a year as we took it from start to finish. So some of the early stuff on here, Cody Grivno helped me with some of it. Kent Johnson helped me with some of it. Eric White helped with some of it too. Matter of fact, he built that. Oh, you can't see it, but there's a lovely slide shed over on one side of the layout that he kind of stick built to fit it in place, because we couldn't follow the plan per se, because we got tracks going in and up and out and all over the place. So it really kind of threw him for a loop, but eventually he was able to do it. But anyway, yes, it's called Olympia because Kent came up with the name. He's always liked Pacific Northwest logging, railroading, and mountain railroading and things like that, and so therefore that's where the name came from. But really, it could be just about anywhere that's got rugged forested terrain. So
you sent us photographs of these beautiful company houses. I guess those maroon houses were also scratch built, weren't they?
Well, actually, the houses are not. Those are your good old American model builders kits.
Oh, yeah.
Just basic skid shack. But what I did is, in looking through all the photos of in books and things on logging, I found that a lot of times they took these, put them in a semi-permanent setting, and then they would build porches on them. Everything had wood walkways because you're dealing with, Mud City most of the time. Right. They come in, they strip all the timber out, and so there's nothing left but the earth and what's, all the remains from the logging stuff. So it turns into a quagmire pretty quickly. So they'd make boardwalks that connected all these little things, and then industrious people, when they had spare time, would put little porches on them and everything else so they could sit outside. But yeah, they were a lot of fun. Very cool.
You also sent us some gorgeous pictures of the water tank. Now, I imagine that might be scratch built, but I don't want to guess.
No, the water tank is actually a kit, and that's probably one of the only things on the layout that hasn't had any alteration to it whatsoever. Okay. There's an interesting story about that. I had started that, I built the legs for it and gotten that far with it, and then my other work stuff had gotten ramped up, and so I was unable to finish it, but we needed it for the layout. And Eric White had just started as associate editor on Model Railroader magazine, and when you just come in, you're still learning the ropes on stuff and things like that, so you're not fully plugged in yet, and your workload is kind of light. So it became Eric, I need a. So Eric, I need you to finish this water tank. And so he built the rest of the water tank. And he did such a good job with that. I'm like, okay, Eric, I need this slide shed. Could you do that for me? So, he's working on the slide shed. And actually, he had scratch built from remains of the timber from the slide shed. There used to be a different company warehouse on the layout, too. He had scratch built all that to fit into the backdrop when this was just half a layout originally. And so, yeah, that was kind of fun because it's just like, well, I did the stuff I wanted to do, and I made Eric do the rest.
I want to say the log loader looks really cool, too, but you've got an interesting thing on the end of the layout where you can switch tracks. You call that a sector plate. Explain to us about that really cool gadget.
That's that's a straight ripoff from the Brits, basically. But yes, in order to get between there's the lower track that serves the sawmill and the log pond and everything else, the upper track that splits off and heads up to the logging camp behind me, and eventually I've got a whole nother section started on the other side of that yet that will be another little town and everything else with it, and that will connect there. And then there's a small little staging track that actually hides under the mountain behind me over here. And so that sector plate allows me just in 31 inches to be able to take a train of 4 cars on there, switch it from point to point without needing to use any turnouts whatsoever. Because turnouts are always space hogs. If you have one turnout, that's not too bad. It's only about yay long.
Right.
But as soon as you need to go more than 2 directions, now you got to put another turnout in there. Now we're looking at 1.5 feet at least in order to do the space. And so this allowed me, again, to try and keep the layout as compact as possible, not to have turnouts in that space. So it's all made out of just 3/4 inch MDF, and I love MDF because it doesn't warp, and it's a nice smooth surface. So the sector plate is just MDF sliding on MDF. You don't have to do anything special. There's no rollers, no nothing. And it works very smoothly to move the trains back and forth without derailing anything. That's always the trick when you have a movable track section, is to move it in such a way that it doesn't then tip everything over on it. If you hit that hard, it will do that too, but usually it doesn't.
That's amazing. ON30's amazing. Bachmann really instituted it and kind of started it in this country when they came out with their first locomotive, which came with a train set, in fact. It really started out, it was going to be part of one of those collectible sets that goes with the China.
Like a Thomas Kincaid China Village?
That goes with the China Village, right. That was the initial idea, so they released it on, and they wanted to keep it simple, kind of a situation where it would run on HO scale track. So the guy that bought this at the hobby shop could set it up around Christmas with all the China buildings and be able to snap that easy track together. So they made it work on HO scale track, and it came out to 30 inches in O scale, and it was perfect size for the glass buildings. And then since then, people have taken it and run with it. Ever since that's come out, I saw the narrow gauge Gazette get about 30% thicker over a period of 5 years because all this new activity came in that scale. And I've got some of the micro engineering ON30 track on hand here. I think Dave used Peco track also on his layout, which is great track as well. This micro engineering track's got super scale spikes on it, really scale. And the code 70 track in ON30 comes out to be 30-pound rail. They make it in code 100, code 83, and code 70. We've also got one of the Bachmann ON30 engines on the table here. This is the largest engine they made. It was like a consolidation, as I recall. That's the biggest engine that Bachmann did make in ON30. Even the articulateds didn't have that wide of a body stance on them. They were more like logging articulateds, like the Simpson that you would see, that very famous logging locomotive that ran. But I also have a diesel on the table. Daniel found this on our shelf today, and this is their center cab switcher that they make. So there's a lot of different options for ON30. And when you think about it, running on HO scale track, you're seeing an O scale building next to it. It's a bit of a adjustment mentally, but it's so great for the scratch builder. I mean, because it's so much, the dexterity of everything is so much larger, you can really trick it out and detail it much the way David has done on his layout.
Speaking of details, also got to point out here, we got some rail weathering solution from Microengineering in a 4 fluid ounce bottle, and we also got the big stuff.
I went there yesterday, and the reason I went there is I thought on the next show next week we would talk about their line of tools. A lot of people don't realize that they have tools, that they even sell tools. So we're going to talk about all their different products that they make, rail nippers, track cleaners, and they gave us some of the track darkening stuff, which is what they use to darken the rail. In this case, I've got nickel silver rail here on this code 55 or 70 rail here in ON30. And all the rail darkener does is makes it weathered rail. It actually just, I've used the rail darkener on brass models after I built them instead of painting them. Sometimes they look just better with the darkening agent on it because it simply darkens the metal and makes it actually look like metal. It takes brass and makes it look great. So yeah, rock and roll. We're going to talk about the microengineering tools and things like that on next week's show. I'll go down there and pick up all the really cool stuff. While I've got you on here, you've got me thinking about Model Railroader magazine, and I went to Deerberg's, our grocery store locally here, and picked up the latest copy, Dave, just to catch up on, you know, how things are going. I mean, all the color, the paper quality, I see tons of ads. It looks like you guys are doing really well, and I really love the Bachmann ad on the back of that Charger.
I wonder who shot that photo.
I don't know.
Such a cheap plug for myself. But yeah, rock and roll. Did I also mention, I probably forgot, I just saw it here, Microengineering also makes ON30 turnouts in the various code rails that I mentioned. So there's a whole line. And the reason I've got this here is I'm going to build a project layout for Model Railroad Hobbyist magazine because I've got to do a video in this winter about something. So we're going to do an N-scale layout, we're going to do an ON30 layout, make it simple, something that'll fit on your dining room table and be just something, you know, that's the perfect size layout for somebody to work with. In fact, we're using a dining room table, a small one here. A layout like that in ON30 works because the radiuses, all the models are designed to run on tight radiuses. It's a very, what's the word, intimate scale. We're talking 15-mile-an-hour running, top speed. Which, you know, adds a lot. I noticed you had a couple different locomotives. You got a Climax, and what are all the types of locomotives that you got? A Porter?
Let's see. I've got a little Porter. Yep. Matter of fact, that's number 11, and I named it for my wife. We won't go into any reason why. Just there it is. So
that's cool, man. That's cool.
And then I have a couple of Heislers. One that doesn't have a crew in it yet. The locomotive is done and weathered, and the sound decoder's installed and everything else. I haven't gotten around to get the crew installed, but once it's installed, then that'll be on the layout too. And then I also have the Climax, which is the first locomotive that we had built for this layout. And I will tell you that. The Bachmann locomotives are lovely. They've got wonderful detail on them. I have found that if you install capacitor packs in them, they run much more reliably.
Yes.
I couldn't believe the difference. The Climax was an okay runner when I first got it out of the box, and we had it on the layout originally. But then I installed an NCE capacitor pack in it, and oh my gosh, all of a sudden it's just like, wow, this thing runs like, nobody's business. So it was good stuff. Why are you laughing at me? Stop laughing at me.
Because you just said the magic 3 letters, NCE. The power of DCC.
I actually pitched that to you on purpose. You know that, don't you?
Well, the fact is, that's what we use. Every time I go say, let's go run some trains, that's what we use down here, because the guys, Mike is getting a system. They're simple to use. What system do you use in that layout?
Oh, look at that.
Oh, wow.
The power cab.
So the power cab is the perfect system for a small layout. It gives you just enough power to run locomotives, and yet you can upgrade the system. So if you ever wanted to go to radio or anything else, it's a system that builds onto itself, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, very much so. And part of the reason why I've got it on this layout in particular is that I use it for other layouts as well. And so that, you just buy, usually, I don't even have the big honking NCE system. I just have their basic power cab set up. And as long as you program the cabs to different numbers, away you go. So I can use the power cab from that layout on this layout too, and have, 2 cabs running at the same time and stuff like that. But the other thing I've done, hang on, just a second.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
Okay.
And
I told you he'd be a great guest.
yeah.
Now we can see more of the layout.
Yeah, there you go. And
right.
he's back. Well, what do we got here?
Sorry about that. The other thing I was going to show you too, though, this is kind of cool, and I just thought of this while we were talking. All right, so this is just one of those little 3-foot test track things from Good Deals DCC, and we sell these in the Kalmbach Hobby Store. I told you I wasn't going to hawk product, but I'm hawking product.
That's cool.
So
you're allowed.
we sell these in the Kalmbach Hobby Store, and they're great for, you just put on your workbench. But what I did is I took a spare NCE power cab port, and I cut off the bottom of the plate so it fit under here, and I just mounted it under the test track. So this just sits on my workbench, and I have a power supply for it. And then all I have to do is take the throttle off the layout, plug it into this when I want to do some programming,
right,
and I'm ready to go.
That's exactly what George Bogatov described in last month's What's Neat video, how to make a programming track.
Yes.
Just like what you showed. And he used his NCE system to illustrate the system, because the NCE system's got a separate programming mode in it where you can actually program locomotives with it.
Right.
So, I mean, you don't even need to use JMRI. You can just use the NCE system and it works.
Right.
Yeah. What's nice then is this little setup here is really easy to travel with. So I've done talks where one of my other hobbies, and we can talk about this another time, is British railroading. I so want to build a British 00 layout. I've been buying up equipment for quite a while, but I've done talks about installing sound decoders in British locomotives, and so I take this with me when I do that, because you can just put it out there and explain everything and show the programming right then and there. It works out really great. So
this is where I'm going to do a shout out to Jennifer Kirk out there in the UK and England. Hey Jenny, we love you, and we're glad that your show is doing as well as it is. I watch your live shows. I've been on some of them, and I too was born in England. So, and my father, David, models English railroads. He was big time into the English modeling. Yes, well, I think that O gauge is what they use as a semblance for their gauge standard.
Yeah.
00.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you've got 00, which is 1 to 76, and then you've got, it's funny because their gauges are always a little different than American gauges, even though they run on the same track, and yeah.
The stuff
00 gauge track is actually a little too narrow for real 1 to 76 gauging, but they did it in order to be compatible with the rest of the world in HO, so.
All right, I'm going to tell you a story, because You work for Kalmbach, Model Railroader Magazine. I am going to talk about some of the articles that I've had in Model Railroader Magazine. One of the first ones that I ever had published, my very first probably published picture was, I got honorable mention in your photo contest a long time ago because I shot a locomotive on a tall steel viaduct for microengineering. And I literally shot this picture on the roof of my Supra, and I was on Highway 109 way out in Manchester, where I could find some golden brown trees.
I remember seeing that.
Right.
Yeah.
What a prop.
That was a long time ago. And then the very first article that I did for you guys where I really worked at it was when we had the Midwest Valley Modelers layout in an issue of Model Railroader. That might have been 1991. That was a really great issue.
Oh, and that was an awesome layout, too.
I worked with Jim Kelly on that project.
Managing editor, right.
A lot of different photo shoots in order to get that cover right. And the reason was because I didn't know what I was doing in photography back then. I had no clue. And one of the editors of another magazine said, oh, you got to go out and buy a 60mm macro lens. That's how you shoot model railroad photography. Well, that turned out to not be exactly good advice, but I tried to shoot that cover with a 60mm macro. And if you can imagine that, you're looking through a tunnel and you're getting so far away from the models. Yeah. Instead of getting in there really tight with a 28mm wide angle where you're actually in the scene. So I learned a lot through those years.
Something like that.
Like that.
There you go.
Yeah, like that.
And that layout was a great layout. We did a lot of train shows with it, and we've talked about it on the show a lot. But I'm going to take you to San Clemente, California, because my wonderful wife took me out there about 1995, I think it was. And I couldn't believe it, man. Not only did you have the ocean and the bluffs, but you had train tracks right next to the ocean. And it happened to be my favorite railroad, Santa Fe. So the background story on that was I was hanging out down here in the basement. I think Terry Backus was here that day from the NMRA Bulletin, because I also worked with the NMRA doing some photography and articles for them. And Terry came out here to the house and spent a few days on the bluff and just wanted to get his feel around here. And while he was over there sitting by this very window looking out with the binoculars and doing some computer work, I went over there with a 6-pack of beer and a few flat sheets of foam and some photographs that I happened to have of San Clemente, California, and said, I'm going to build the beach. I'm literally right now in the next 2 hours going to make a beach. And that's literally what I did. Before I was on my third beer, I think I had it pretty much carved out. And I had figured out that the key to making the beach was to keep everything subtle, everything kind of low, the transition from the track, and just follow the prototype pictures exactly. And what you end up with is you're modeling water, which is nothing but the dark surface. But what color is water in reality? The color of water is the color of the sky. Because as you look at the water, you're looking at the reflection of the sky. So I knew if I made the water dark and took some silicone caulk and just highlighted the tops of the caulk with some white paint, that would create the surf. So everything looked good, sort of kind of okay, except for there still was something missing from the scene. And I was sitting back staring at it. The people looked right. The riprap was right. The parking lot, the trains, everything was in the right spots. Even the waves looked absolutely dead on. But when I created the effect of where the water washes up onto the sand and then stops and recedes, it always leaves a row of stuff like seaweed and little whatever litter. It was that little line that kind of did this arcing motion through the scene that just finished it off.
How did you model that?
I just took some real fine ground foam that was that brownish autumn color from Woodland Scenics and just sprinkled a little bit with my fingers in a line. And then hit it with the Woodland Scenic Cement, and boom, Terry Backus came over there. He's like, you got it. It's done. Your beach is done. I think I did it in 3 hours. And you guys ran that, I think, on the cover of your calendar, and I did an article in your magazine on how to make the beach. Luke,
it was before I worked there, but I remember that article very, very well. It was I was impressed with it. I thought it was really good modeling, and that's where being an artist, as you are, comes into play. Because no, I'm serious. Because you can see you were able to see, hey, I'm missing a detail here. What's not there?
Yeah, it just didn't
that
look right.
Makes all the difference in the world for making a scene that looks. Oh, it looks good, but is it realistic enough? Well, you took it that next level, which is cool.
You're awesome. So you said something very interesting. You said company store. You guys are selling products now in addition to publishing the magazine, and you guys are going online with your publication too. Things are changing in the industry, and you guys are keeping up with that change. I'm very...
Yeah, we're trying to. You know, we've kind of branched out into the world of e-commerce, largely because we not only have model railroader and classic toy trains, but we also have fine-scale modelers still. And so... these guys need hobby tools, they need supplies and stuff like that. And you know, there are things you'll always go to Micromark for, there are things you'll always go to Walthers for and other places like that. But there are also, if you're going to buy a book from me, if you're going to buy magazines from us, you know, and you also need some hobby knives. You also need, you know, a pair of track pliers. You need, you name it, those sorts of things. We have some of that stuff in stock. So we've been branching out on things. And I see that I was looking at that rail weathering solution from Micro Engineering that you've got sitting on the tabletop there, and the little wheels are going like, hey, we should stock that because I want to be able to use it. So that would be good.
There's a lot of good stuff that we talk about on the show that you guys should stock, because everything we talk about on the show we've used. And that's the one thing, if we've used it and we know it works, it's so much easier than something going blind into.
Yeah.
Right, and that's the stuff we stock in our store is the stuff that Cody and I are using all the time.
That's
and
funny.
So it makes it easier for us to get a hold of it too. But other than that,
when I talk about Denny Yelsma from Yelsma's Graphics, just for an example, Denny makes the most beautiful railroad art, and it's all embroideried. It's not silk screened. So the thread's got a bit of a sheen to it. So we go out to the bars when we used to be able to go out to the bars and get our wings after the show. And we all wore our What's Neat This Week jackets that Denny had made for us. And I mean, the people gave us compliments about how beautiful the work art was. That the Union Pacific Big Boy jacket that we showed off on the show. And Denny is going to be on one of our shows soon, because he is quite a modeler too, and he's going to talk about his models.
All right,
and I think next week he's sending me a jacket, and I don't know what it is yet, but it's something that he wants to show off on next week's shows.
Cool.
Because Denny's really a great artist himself at the embroidery, you know, creativity of making garments, our hats, all the neat stuff that we've got. So next week we'll have something special. I don't know what it is yet, but it's going to show up here. And Joshua's getting a new jacket made too. So if any clubs out there or anything like that want to have jackets made with railroad art on it with your club emblems, he'll do custom work as well. That's Yelsma Graphic, Denny Yelsma out there.
Maybe you can sell sponsorships on little patches and put them on Joshua's jacket, like
people that see his jacket love it.
yeah, like race car drivers.
Race car drivers.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be neat? Oh, that's a good idea.
Actually,
That is a good idea.
I hate to say it, Mike. I hate to say it, Mike, but we've actually talked about doing that at work. You know, it's like we're on camera all the time. We should be selling sponsorship spots on, you know. David's right arm is in the shot all the time, so sell one right here. You know, that's
November What's Neat. I just finished it last night at 3 o'clock in the morning. It is done. And in the November video, Daniel Coombs opens it up with that part where he says What's Neat starts right now. And
It's
he was
easy.
over there.
I've done it so many times before.
He was over there cleaning the track. I do a segment on how to make cactus, those great big saguaro cactus. I got some ideas from show number 72. We had Travis Handchug,
I guess.
Handchug on the show, and Travis made cactus out of clay.
Yeah.
So we show how to do that out of pipe cleaners. Some people make cactus out of those plastic white coat hangers and carve them out and bend them. And the other folks that make these cactus are ZYX Creative. We had those on the show. In fact, those are right here. And I show those off on this video too. It's a 4-minute video on about saguaro cactus. And I also do
those are cool.
I do a 3-minute segment in that video on how to make trackside bushes like the honeysuckle that grows around here in Missouri using wire armatures. A really simple way. I know people use lichen or lichen to make bushes. Other people take the ground poly foam and make these little puffball bushes. But there's something about a wire armature that gives you a branch structure that's believable. So that's also what we cover in the November video. And then our very own James Regier, who's not here tonight with us, shows us in 24 minutes how he did that trackmobile, how he put in the sequence of lights, got them to flash in the right degree of flash, the sound, he shoehorned sound into that model.
Right.
Yep.
And he shows us how he wrote code to program the lighting. He also shows how he built the speaker boxes, 3D printed them. So rock and roll. And that model just went to James Wright's house this week. That's James's model. So I can't wait to see how that turns out. Next week on the show, we're going to have George Bogatok. And our friends for the NMRA are also going to be on next week's show. And that's pretty much everything I wrote down on my list. David, is there anything else you want to talk about this evening before we close out show number 132?
Well, you had mentioned that, let's see if I can find it. Oh, I dropped it. Hang on. Oh! All the way on the floor. Sorry, there we go. You had mentioned that we've been trying to expand into the world of digital.
Correct.
As all of us have talked before the show today, you know, it's pretty obvious now is not the time to be in print publishing if you can avoid it, simply because of the fact that, you know, with everything shrinking and the difficulty of, well, newsstands even, just newsstands are disappearing. Hobby shops, you know, they still carry products, which is great. But even those numbers are way down from where they were even 10 years ago. And so what our newest thing, let me just throw this on real quick here. Our newest thing is trains.com. Now, you're probably like, well, trains.com, you've been doing trains.com since like 1998. Well, this is a completely different trains.com. We had dabbled in the world of kind of membership subscription digital products with MR Video Plus. We launched that in 2013, and that was very successful for us. This is the logical next step, which takes all of our brands, puts it under one digital membership umbrella where you'll have access to all of the print archives that we have completely digitized so that you can go take a look at it. We'll have photo galleries, we'll have weekly how-to content, all sorts of not only articles online, but then additional video made just like with Video Plus and everything else. So we're very excited about it. That's going to launch, I hope, within the next 4 weeks here. So just, you know, stay tuned. Check us out.
That's a lot of work. Will there be every back issue of Model Railroader magazine on that?
Yes, sir. All the way back to all the way back to January 1934.
Wow. I've got every issue of Model Railroader down here from almost the year one that you guys have started out. And those are really cool. The smaller, I got every single one of them down here. That means I could actually clear out all that space under the layout now. Cool. Rock and roll.
You know what? Let me tell you real quick. This is a fun little story. 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, we had, amazingly enough, somebody figured out that the 1000th issue of Model Railroader magazine, we'd finally come around to that, so we did a special cover for it and everything else. But Kent Johnson and I, he's the associate producer, well, he's now the producer of MR Video Plus with me, but we took every issue we had, all 1,000 of them, and we laid them end to end throughout the entire building. So we went all the way through our building into the extension wing of the building, turned around, and got almost all the way back to the starting point, putting them all out. It took us all day to do it. But it was so cool. And what was the neatest part is that everybody in the building then came upstairs to look at it, and they're like, "Oh, hey, here's the year I was born, and this is my birth month issue." And you know, it was so cool. It was very, very neat just to see them all like that, see how it evolved and everything else. It was an amazing way to see it all. It was very cool.
Mike, we're going to go long on this show. I can already see we're at 35 minutes. You brought some vehicles to talk about, didn't you?
Yeah, the few cars I've been working on the last couple weeks. I really haven't been doing much other than got these finished. But this one back here is an old Revell moving van that I had in my junk box. I got it at a train show, and I didn't even really realize what it was. It was painted black, so I painted it and put those decals on it. And the cab is from the Matchbox number 48 GMC refrigerator truck. I cast that.
I know that vehicle.
Oh my gosh!
So
I know, right?
Yeah, and then the one in the middle, the red and white one, that's a Chevy step van from Greg Dixon.
Here's the original Matchbox.
Yeah, it's that same cab
right
there. Yeah,
I know, because my mom would always put fingernail polish on the bottom of my Matchbox cars when I was 3.
Good idea.
I've had this since I was 3 years old, so there's good use in those vehicles.
Wow. Right.
I didn't mean to, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Yeah. But that red and white step van, that casting is available from Greg Dixon, and the lettering that got me started on the whole thing, it was Snap-on Tools, was from Stan Yadlowski up in New Jersey. He sent those to me, and because he had done a Classic Metalworks Metro van with that on, and I really liked it, so I was able to adapt. He made it a little bit bigger for me to use that step van. So then the last one is another one of John Tyson's castings. It's a 1971 Chevy Impala, which I made to model a friend of mine's dad had when I was a senior in high school. It was a 71. It was a brand new car, and it was pretty nice. So as long as he had that casting, I made a model of it.
You're awesome, Mac. Everybody loves it when you bring vehicles and talk about all the cool stuff you did. David Popp, I'd like to invite you to St. Louis whenever traveling situation gets better, where you could come here.
I want to come run trains. I love running trains.
We can run garden railroad outside. We'd light you a bonfire, run trains inside, help you shoot some video. I'll take you down to microengineering, and you can check out.
That would be awesome. I would love to see microengineering. That would be great.
I was going to take them to the Museum of Transportation.
Oh,
Yeah.
And I want to see that too.
Road trips.
yeah,
All right.
I was so disappointed the NMRA got canceled in St. Louis this summer because I was really looking forward to it. So
I really enjoyed coming up to Milwaukee last year for Train Fest. I had never been there before, and it was a fun time.
Cool.
I saw that Northeastern modelers, that layout you guys, Northeastern prototype modelers maybe?
Oh, yeah. Those guys there's some nice stuff.
What a layout.
It's the best hobby in the world with the best people in it. And I know we could sit here and talk all night long because we're probably going to do that after the show. There's a lot of other stuff I know we're going to talk about. Anyway, with that, guys, this is show number 132, and this is the best hobby in the world with folks like Mike Budde, David Popp, and Daniel Coombs. And with that, gentlemen, let's go run some trains.
All right.